Akartuhu karma bandoyam purushasya yadashrayaha guneshu sastu prakrite kaivalyam tesh vatakatam. Hence, even though he is the passive performer of all activities, how can there be freedom for the soul as long as material nature acts on him and binds him? So Srila Prabhupada writes in the first canto of the Bhagavatam that the real need of the soul is for freedom. Prabhupada writes, although the living entity desires freedom from the contamination of matter. So Prabhupada's not just saying the devotees or the spiritualists, he's saying the living entity. We all want to be free from the contamination of matter. Nobody wants to be controlled by having to eat, having to sleep, by lust, by anger, by old age, by disease, the weather. Nobody wants to be under the control of material nature and the contamination of matter. Nobody likes the fact that their bad qualities and their desires are controlling them. Even ordinary materialistic people wish that they were free. They wish that they didn't feel, like Arjuna explains in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that we're forced to do things even that we don't want to do. You know, we don't want to do them. And yet we feel forced. We know, like, this is wrong. It's not in my best interest. I really don't want to act this way. And we do it anyway. I don't want to think this way. I don't like this thoughts. I don't like this action. And there we are. And this is a problem. This is a problem. And Devahuti is identifying the problem in a very interesting way here. Akartuhu karma bandoyam. So she's identifying the problem a little differently than most materialists would identify it. She understands the problem and she's asking for a solution. So Srila Prabhupada here in the purport gives the solution, and he gives something that looks like the solution but isn't. We can say it's a parody of the solution. And when Srila Prabhupada wrote this purport, he was writing very clearly from his experiences growing up in India and seeing these charlatan meditators who, after their meditation, would smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. But we in the world today are seeing a lot of people going for this parody of freedom, this urge toward this impersonal or voidist or even atheistic meditation, which looks like it gives you freedom, but doesn't really. So let's look at the problem, and then let's look at the, somewhat attractive but not effective solution, and the real solution. And Prabhupada makes a very interesting statement here in the purport about Devahuti and the real solution, which I think should give us all great hope and good guidance. So what is the problem? Akartuhu karma bando. We're not the doer. Akarta. We're not the doer. Karta means the doer. Karma banda, but yet we are bound. We're bound by something that we're not even doing. We're bound by something that we're not even doing. We are the witness. As Srila Prabhupada puts it, we become passive. He uses the word passive in the word for word, in the translation, and in the purport. We go from being free to being bound, from being active to being passive. My late godbrother, Sadaputa Prabhu, compared the situation of Maya to virtual reality, where a person puts on, a virtual reality headset and they think that they're acting, but they're not. They're just observing. And such is the case even when people are, for example, playing computer games, where they're not really doing what they think they're doing. They're not really, capturing the gold and killing the bad guys or whatever they do in these games, but they're emotionally experiencing as if they were doing those things. But everything in the game is being carried out differently from them. You could say that the real game is happening from electricity. You could say it's happening from ones and zeros, or it's happening from metal and plastic. But it certainly isn't the game player who's doing everything in the game. The game player is desiring and is communicating those desires to the game via the machinery of the game, but the player is not doing the activities that are happening in the game. Although it appears that they are. It looks like, oh, they're the ones doing it, but that is an illusion. And that illusion, it's not really very satisfying. It's not really very satisfying because we want to be acting directly. And when you're acting in the game, you're constrained by the game. You're constrained by the way your character can look. You're constrained by how it can move. You're constrained by the world of the game. You know, you're not really free. And this is true in any kind of game or simulation, or, you know, if we're watching a movie or we're reading a book and we identify with the characters in the movie or in the book, you know, that when the character in the story becomes in trouble, then our heart goes faster and our breath gets shallower. And, you know, when they get something exciting, we're excited. And when something funny happens, we laugh, although it's not happening to us. We're passive. We're sitting in the theater, you know, or we're sitting in our living room. We're not going on the adventure happening in the book or the theater or the film. But we're experiencing it in one sense as if it's happening to us, not fully. You know, there's a lot of research that if I imagine, like there's an exercise that is sometimes done where, you know, you close your eyes and you relax and you imagine that there's a lemon in front of you, and you imagine the texture and you imagine the smell, and, you know, you imagine putting it in your mouth, and you actually can get a sour taste in your mouth from imagining this lemon, just like we experience in dreams, that I have eaten meals in dreams. You know, I have run in a dream. I have done things in a dream that I have done in real life. And when I am in the dream, I'm experiencing those things. Because actually the experiences are taking place in the mind. The experiences are taking place in the mind. And there's a whole science of this, the philosophy of science, the philosophy of research. Who is the doer? How are we experiencing things? What is the relationship between the self, the mind, and the objective world? And it's an area in which there's a tremendous amount of what Prabhupada calls mental speculation. When I took courses in the PhD program on the philosophy of science, I thought, oh, this is what Prabhupada means by mental speculation. You know, who are we? How are we experiencing the world? And especially this part of the Bhagavatam, this third canto with Lord Kapila Dev, and also its large sections in the second canto, deal with these questions. The way we can tell that it's happening in the mind, I mean, later on in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, the Avanti Brahmana says all happiness and distress is in the mind, is if someone has a surgical operation and by anesthesia the mind is unconscious, then the body can be cut and there's no reaction. So the sensations are not taking place in the body. The experiences are not actually taking place in the body. They're taking place in the mind. And in one sense, they're not even really taking place in the mind, because the mind is also a machine. In one sense, the experiences are not happening at all. It's just some sort of imagination. So this is the situation. And at the same time, we're bound. I mean, it's so peculiar, because if I'm the akartahu, I'm not even the doer, I'm passive. why can't I just get up and walk away? I mean, I can do that in this world. I can take the virtual headset off. I can put the book down. I can turn off the movie. I can walk out of the theater. I can just put it down, right? Right? I can wake up from the dream. Now, there is a situation in which we can't put it down, and that is a situation of an intoxicant. So if a person takes alcohol or marijuana or LSD or some intoxicant, then they're not able to get out of the experience of that intoxicant until the action of the intoxicant is over. In most cases, there's nothing that can be done until the action of the intoxicant is over. The person can't drink alcohol and then just say, oh, I actually don't want to be affected by the alcohol. I don't like it, so I'm just going to walk out of the theater. No, once the person has taken that drug, once the person has ingested that chemical, the action of the chemical will work for a particular time. And there you are. So the material nature is very much like that. It's like a kind of a drug, which we take voluntarily, just like, the vast majority of the time when people are taking an intoxicant, they're doing it voluntarily. Obviously, there are some exceptions, but generally people take intoxication voluntarily. And, sometimes they don't like it. Often they don't like, when they're out of the intoxicant, what they did or what they said. They find it embarrassing. Of course, many times people commit horrific crimes under the influence of intoxication. So our coming under the material nature is something like that once we come under the material nature, we get under this law of action and reaction, that then it just simply has to play out. Yeah. It's not something that we can release ourselves from once we're in it. Of course, there is a place where Prabhupada said we can get out of material nature just by desiring to get out, and that we'll get to in a moment. But generally, once we communicate to Krishna that we want to be in illusion, then we're kind of stuck under that illusion, even if we don't like it, and even though we're not experiencing anything on a real level. Now, you might say, well, Prabhupada does say we can get out just by wanting to get out. So can't we just say, I want to get out? And such is the parity of freedom that Srila Prabhupada writes about extensively in this purport, where a person says, okay, I don't like being under the control of material nature. I don't like being a slave. I've become from active to passive, from free to bound. I have thoughts that I don't like. I have actions that I don't like. I have situations that I don't like. I really, this is not a very good deal. So let me just meditate. Let me just become detached. Let me just become detached. Let me walk out of the theater. Let me close the book. Or in some cases, as Prabhupada's saying here, you just say, well, nothing's real. There's no God. Or I am God. I am controlling the sun and the moon. Or everything here is meaningless, as Prabhupada says in this purport. There's no pious or sinful activity. It's all meaningless. But Srila Prabhupada's pointing out that it doesn't work. That he has seen a lot of these meditators, they meditate, and then afterwards they're smoking tobacco and drinking alcohol, that they're not out of the grips of material nature as soon as they finish this meditation. So it's interesting that the impersonalists who go for this parity of freedom have a lot of things right, but they still don't get liberated. It's almost like they're having a parody or an imitation of liberation without the real liberation. And because it is close. And a lot of it is truth. It's a lot of half-truths in what they have. It seems like it ought to work. I mean, this impersonal meditation, they're saying we're the akartahu, we're the observer. And we'll find in the world today, people teaching impersonal or voidist meditation, they really emphasize you're the observer. This is the whole idea of mindfulness. You be in the present, you just accept whatever happens, you don't try to control it, and you just realize that you're the observer. So it's true. That's true. We're not the controller, we're just the passive observer. So you accept that. You stop pretending that you're the doer and you're the controller. And, then some of them are teaching, well, you are one with God. Well, we are one with God. Achinta Beta Beta Tattva. We do have the same qualities as God. We are one with God. To say there's no such thing as pious or sinful activities. Well, Krishnadas Kaviraj says that. There's nothing really good or bad. And that basically all material activities, whether pious or sinful, in one sense is all just degrees of the same thing. There really isn't, materially speaking, in one sense, there really isn't good or bad. So, that's all kind of true, sort of, kind of, but it doesn't work. Well, why doesn't it work? Because the impersonalists and this meditation or voidists are not getting to the root of why we want to be in illusion in the first place. Because what they're not facing is that we're in illusion because we want to be in illusion. When the impersonalists and the voidists are saying, I want to be free, they're not really wanting to be free. What they're wanting to be free of is the reactions to their activities. They don't really want to be free of illusion. Because what is the essence of illusion? I want to take the place of God. That's the essence of illusion. Is I want to be the supreme enjoyer and the supreme controller, and I want to be the center. So they haven't gotten rid of it. In fact, many of them are propounding their oneness with God as their philosophy. They're intensifying their desire to be God. But we can't be God. We can be God in the sense that we have a oneness of quality and a oneness of interest. And if we are really Krishna conscious, we feel that oneness. Prabhupada gives the example, which only makes sense if you've been in a country like India, of a person riding a bicycle who holds on to a car and therefore goes as fast as the car. I don't think we see people doing that in New Zealand or America, at least. I have never seen anybody do that. So there is a sense in which the pure devotee is one with God, but the impersonalists and the voidists, they want to kind of just be God. They're not looking for a oneness of interest or a oneness of love, and therefore they don't get at the root of the problem. We're Anandamaya Vyasat. We're pleasure seeking, we're variety seeking, we're relationship seeking. And if I don't get to the root of the fact that I want to be God instead of having a loving relationship with Him, then my meditation won't work, because I'll be saying on one hand that I want to get free from illusion, and on the other hand, I'm saying that I still want to be in illusion. I hope that that's clear. The illusion is that I'm the supreme. So if I want that illusion, but I don't want the illusion, what I'm saying is I just don't want to suffer. It's kind of like people saying, I want to eat as much as I would like without gaining weight. I mean, who wouldn't like that? And some people have that kind of by nature, by their metabolism. They can eat an entire birthday cake and a whole gallon of ice cream, and there's no effect on their bodily weight. And other people eat an extra cookie and they gain a kilo. So there are people who can do that, at least sometimes in their life. But we'd all like to do that. We'd all like to be able to eat whatever we would like in whatever quantities we would like without getting a stomach ache, or without feeling tired, without gaining weight, whatever. But the point is that we still want to enjoy food. We just don't want the reaction. Just like people want to be able to have illicit sex without disease, without pregnancy, without, the pain of broken emotional attachments and things like that. Right? I mean, that's what people want. They let me have sexual pleasure without the suffering that comes with it, or without the responsibility. Let me have sexual pleasure without having to take care of people, without having to be there for them and their emotional ups and downs and all this. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for how can I get the pleasures that I want without the concomitant suffering. So the impersonalists, when they say they want to be free, they don't, in their heart of hearts, I want to be free from illusion of thinking that I'm God. What they really want to be free from is material nature shoving them around. They want to be the Lord of nature, kind of like Hiranyakashipu, who also meditated for a long time and was a very powerful yogi, that, I want to be the Lord of nature. But that's not getting to the root of the problem. In order to get out of illusion, the solution isn't to become the controller of the illusion. The solution is to come to the reality. Now, Krishna is very kind. He's actually extraordinarily kind. And if somebody wants to become a lord of Maya, if somebody wants to enjoy by becoming a lord of Maya, and they worship him and they're his devotees, he will allow that, at least to some extent, like the great demigods. I'm sure we've all had births as demigods, where one masters the material energy more or less. The great mystics of the universe. There's great personalities who are, to a large extent, lords of Maya. But none of them are fully lords of Maya. They also have difficulty with their senses. They also have difficulty with their minds. They have various struggles. They have enemies and so forth. Abrahma, Bhuvana, Loka, Punar, Avartino, Upecha, Tukanteya, Punarjanma. So that doesn't really do it either. And then at the end of the universe, that little game of, well, I'm going to be a lord of Maya becomes over. And again, they're in the body of Mahavishnu. So again, we've tried that. And that's not the solution. So what is the real solution? The real solution is, I want truth. Right? The real way of getting out of the illusion is not just closing the book. It's not just walking out of the movie theater, but it's going to real life. What is the real life? And the real life is that I'm a subordinate servant of God, which, to a conditioned soul doesn't sound very attractive. I was just hearing Prabhupada say that the other day, that we're not very attracted by this concept of being a servant. It makes sense, right? Because in this world, being a servant isn't very attractive. I don't know of any parents who tell their kids, grow up and be a servant. that's your goal of life, is to grow up and be a servant. Grow up and be a doctor, grow up and be a banker. In the media and the literature, it's not usually the servants that are glorified. It's usually the big people. So we don't like this idea of being a servant, and we don't like this idea of surrender. The word surrender, it brings up all these notions of being in a war and waving a white flag and, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. I don't like it, but I surrender. I'm forced. But that's the only solution. The only solution is to know that I'm a servant and I'm surrendered. And to do that, we have to remember that God is a very loving friend. He's not envious. He's not inimical. And that he wants to fulfill all of our desires in reality in a way that has no negative consequences, where we do have unlimited enjoyment without inebriety, as Prabhupada would say it, without any kind of difficulty. So what is that process? And of course, Prabhupada is speaking about that here. If we look at this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a very interesting statement here. He says that Devahuti is gradually coming to the point of surrender. Devahuti is gradually coming to the point of surrender. Now, that's a rather astonishing statement when we consider that Devahuti is the mother of God. She's the mother of God. She's not an ordinary person, but she's gradually coming to the point of surrender. So the real process of liberation is to come to the point of surrender. And Srila Prabhupada would say, we can surrender in a moment, but of course, most of us don't. We might fool ourselves at some point in our journey and say, I'm surrendering. And then Krishna says, okay, what about this and that? Say, oh, I guess I didn't really surrender. This gradually coming to the point of surrender is sadhana bhakti, or the word often used is abhyasa, or practice. So sadhana or abhyasa, practice bhakti, gradually coming to the point of surrender. Ultimately, what gradually coming to the point of surrender means is getting the conviction, getting the faith that if I surrender, I'll be happy, that I want to surrender. And here we come back to this, where Prabhupada says that the living entity can get free of the clutches of Maya merely by desiring to do so. So while the impersonalists and the voidists think that they're desiring to become free of Maya, they're not really, because they're not desiring surrender in reality. But in bhakti, one gradually gets faith. Krishna is my friend. Krishna's looking out for me. Krishna's taking care of me. Krishna's only going to do what's good for me. Everything Krishna does is good for me. All my desires will be fulfilled beyond any way that I can imagine. And as we grow in that faith, we surrender more and more and more. Or you could say, we gradually increase our desire more and more. Because Bhaktisiddhanta says that partial surrender is not surrender. But we gradually increase our desire for surrender. We gradually increase our desire for surrender until we get to the point of surrender, which is bhava and prema. I mean, if we think of it in mundane terms, we could think of it like if some, young man and woman meet and they're kind of checking out, do I like you? Do I not like you? Do I want to spend time with you? Do I not want to spend time with you? And gradually their relationship develops until they get to the point where they say, yes, I want to marry you. That's a big surrender, to marry somebody, to say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. Yes? But there's a it's not really a gradual surrender. There's a gradual awakening of the desire to surrender. So there's something that goes on, something similar that happens where in the process of bhakti, we start becoming more and more attracted by Krishna, and we start becoming more and more disgusted with our desire to enjoy the material nature. We're not just, in the beginning, often devotees will speak about disgust with the effects of Maya. You can always tell. So I was an editor back to Godhead for 30 years, and you could always tell in people's articles when they're not really disgusted with Maya, but they're disgusted with the effects of Maya. They're disgusted with the pollution and the disease and the fighting and all those things that result from being in Maya. But they're not disgusted from Maya about Maya itself. It's not like they're disgusted by their lust, or they're disgusted by their selfishness or their anger or something like that. They're not disgusted with their false ego or with their desire to enjoy the world. They're disgusted with the results of that. And that, the impersonalists are also. But ultimately, we become disgusted with the inner arrogance, with the inner lust, anger, greed, madness, fear. We just become disgusted with the desire to be an illusion. And we go, kind of like a drug addict or alcoholic becomes disgusted with their desire to become intoxicated. At first they're just disgusted with the effects of their intoxication. My wife left me, I got fired from my job, I'm lying in my vomit in the gutter, but they're not disgusted with the alcohol, or they're not disgusted with the desire to escape their life. And at a certain point, they become disgusted with their desire for the alcohol. So at a certain point in bhakti, one becomes so attracted to Krishna, Krishna's name, Krishna's form, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's service, and we become disgusted with the false ego. It's like, ugh. And then at a certain point, we actually surrender. We're not just coming to the point of surrender, we surrender. And then Adaiviyecha gunamayim mama maya durajya mam evaye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. Then Krishna says, it becomes very easy. Because then we really do desire to get out. We don't just desire not to suffer, or we don't just desire to be the Lord of Maya, but we actually really fully desire to get out of Maya. We just like, I don't like this. I don't want this. This isn't the kind of being that I want to be. This isn't the way that I want to exist. This isn't, we see Maya for what it is, and we see Krishna for, we have faith in Krishna's wonderfulness and friendship, and we lose interest in Maya. So that happens generally, gradually. If it happens gradually for Devahuti, it certainly is going to happen gradually for us. And we should see that happening in the process of sadhana bhakti or abhyas yoga. If we don't see that happening, there's something quite wrong. But we should see happening that we are becoming more and more attached to Krishna. And we should see happening that we see Maya for what it is, and we lose an interest. We're just like, well, this is stupid. This is really stupid. I'm not even the kartaha. I'm not even the doer. I'm just this passive observer of all this stuff. And I'm doing things I don't want to do. I'm being things I don't want to be. And it really isn't a good deal. I think I'm going to stop this. So we have some time for questions, comments, additions, subtractions.
Hi, Krishna. I have a question. How can we speed up the process of getting rid of the desire for recognition?
How can we give up the desire for recognition?
Yeah, speed up the process.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And let's see if I can find you the answer from Srila Prabhupada himself. Okay. So this is some Krishna book. Okay. It is clearly stated here that one should try to be recognized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead by one's service and devotion, without which the human form of life is condemned. Devotee must know, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead is also the source of everything. A devotee must know how to render service unto him and thus be recognized by him. Now, this is in the context of Akrura going to Vrindavan, and Akrura is meditating on this. He says that he's going to be embraced by Krishna, right? By his merciful embrace, surely my body, heart, and soul will be completely cleansed of the actions and reactions of my past life. When our bodies touch, I will immediately stand up with folded hands with all humility. Certainly Krishna and Balaram will call me Akrura, uncle, and at that time my whole life will be glorious. Unless one is recognized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his life cannot be successful. So this desire for recognition is natural to the soul. It's natural to the soul. We want someone to give us recognition. We want someone to say, you are my uncle, Akrura. You're my friend. Oh, my friend. Oh, you're my dear servant. Oh, you're my beloved. We're hankering for that. As Jesus said, that, well done, good and faithful servant. We want someone to go, yay! That's what Krishna does to his friends. Krishna and Balaram are dancing and the cowherd boys are going, yay! And then the cowherd boys are dancing and Krishna and Balaram are going, yay! You did it! Oh, look how Sri Dhamma's turning that stick.
That's right.
Now look at you, Dhamma. Krishna's recognizing his devotees. Kavi Kandapur and Nanda Vrindavan Champu talks about how in the Ras dance, sometimes a divine couple are sitting and one of the other gopis is dancing. And Krishna and his consort are saying, well done, well done. Well done, Lalita. Look at how you are dancing. Krishna is saying to, Yasoda and Rohini, oh, what wonderful sweets you've made. Oh, my dear mommy, my dear daddy, my dear uncle, I love you so much. Thank you for taking care of me. In the evening, it's explained that entertainers come, and Nanda and the other older cowherd men and Krishna and his friends, they're watching the entertainment and they're going, well done, well done. So do we want to be recognized by Krishna, or do we want to be recognized by other jivas? And when we want to be recognized by other jivas, there's usually some falsity in it. I know that I'm not really the doer, and I'm not the controller, and I'm not as smart or clever or creative as other people are praising me as being. What do they call that? The imposter syndrome. We know it's not genuine, and we know what we're being praised for. We can't really take more than a sliver of credit for. We know a lot of it is the will of the divine. And we know when other people are recognizing us that they may have some motive. They may be giving us recognition because they want something, or they're trying to manipulate us in some way. And so the recognition of other jivas is not very satisfying. Somebody may give you recognition one day and the next day they criticize you. So those desires are not wrong. The desire for somebody to say, yay, good job, wow. Want Krishna to say that. Act in such a way that Krishna says this. That Krishna will look at us and say, good job. Now, Krishna is not very interested in the result because we cannot control the result anyway, and he already knows that. Krishna is interested in the attitude and the intention. That we can control. And he's going to say, yay, good job, for the attitude and the intention, which is so much more satisfying because other jivas are pretty much just looking at the result. If we mess up the result with good attitude, we don't get any credit. Thank you for asking that. Any other question?
Yeah. I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful class. I had a question around your experience and advice, because I've heard you talk about it before, we talk about having good attitude and intention, but we often can see today a lot of persons coming in from the outside world into Bhakti come with trauma and mental health problems. And often they're sincere, but often they have not control over their, they can have psychiatric problems where they don't have control over their attitudes and feelings while practicing. And my experience has been with some of them that they feel because they can't control how they feel and their emotions, they feel like they're not practicing Bhakti properly, because what we're hearing about, well, you've got to put your heart into it, but they don't feel anything, or for whatever emotional situation for them, they're often feeling very disabled in that department, and it often can be quite what's the word? Over a long period of time, it becomes disheartening, because you feel like you've got this kind of broken mind, so to speak, and it's very distracting to the practice of Bhakti. What's your experience with that, and advice and encouragement for that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I had 2 years of training in counseling, but I'm not like a psychiatrist or psychologist. And I would say that for people who've gone through severe trauma, which is an increasing percentage of the population as Kali Yuga goes on, just the concept of a stable, loving upbringing is becoming more and more the exception rather than the rule. That we do need people who can help people professionally deal with mental issues, just like, if you break your leg, you don't just sit and chant Hare Krishna to your leg. So we do need people who are skilled in these various things. I mean, I personally know right here in the community where got stuck in the pandemic, there's 2 devotees here who have mental illness. And I remember when they first came to Bhakti, it was really a struggle for them. And at this point, after decades, they're 2 of the pillars of the community. And their mental illness is not really an impediment for them anymore. It's still maybe there in one sense. It may or may not go away in a technical sense. Just like if one leg is shorter than the other, it's not going to grow in Bhakti. But they're not hampered by it anymore. They've learned to stop associating with the mind and stop identifying with the mind to become more of an observer of the mind. Can that be done strictly in Bhakti? Yeah, it can. It can. But if people have gone through extensive trauma, then they may need also some support. Like Prabhupada says, you don't go to a spiritual master to heal your physical diseases. And I would say also you don't go to a spiritual master for healing of, bipolar disorder or something like that. Prabhupada says you take help from a psychiatrist. So to learn some techniques for dealing with a particularly uncontrolled mind is going to be very helpful for some people. As it just kind of is what it is. And it's a shame that such is becoming more the norm than the exception. It's really a shame that we now assume in most of the world and an increasing geographical area of the world that people have experienced some kind of trauma and some kind of abuse or abandonment or something at a young age that has scarred them in some way. It's really, really unfortunate. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for your class, Messaji. I was wondering about the point you were making about how we don't really want to be servants.
Mm.
And I noticed that when I was living in the ladies' ashram, that it was very easy for me to want to serve everybody there
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't so fussy.
Okay.
But then when I go to serve my husband, he's a bit fussy. I'm thinking actually that this is Krishna's arrangement for me to be more personal.
Okay.
But it's very purifying. And how do I have a good attitude towards wanting to serve somebody personally when they have feedback for me or when I get corrected? It really flares up my false ego a lot.
Well, one thing is that we can remember that all of our suffering is due to our false ego, and that we're trying to get rid of it. That's sort of the point. You know, if you go to a doctor with a tumor and the doctor's giving you medicine that makes the tumor shrink, that's the idea, even if the medicine may sometimes be bitter. Now, having said that, if we're in a position of authority, we should remember that most of us find it very painful to get rid of our false ego, even though ostensibly we say that's what we're here for. And so generally people in positions of authority, whether you're a guru or you're a husband or you're a parent or you're an ashram leader, generally we try to push on people's false ego very gently and slowly. Because like even Devahuti is gradually getting the desire to surrender. So, you know, if someone's dealing with us that way, where they're pushing a little harder than we feel we can handle, we might want to inform them that, you know, I do want to get rid of my false ego. I do appreciate that you're trying to teach me humility and tolerance, but this is kind of beyond my capacity to deal with it at this point in my Krishna consciousness. And you know, I say I want to get rid of my false ego, but I'm not quite ready to get rid of all of it that fast. And could you deal with me a little bit more gradually? And then to also watch how we're dealing with others. Because often if someone's pushing us a little too hard and a little too fast, it's a reaction to us having pushed somebody else a little too hard and a little too fast, probably without realizing we were doing it. You know, and so Krishna often puts us in that situation so we can say, oh, you know, maybe I shouldn't do that. But it's a very difficult thing, both when you're the authority and you're the subordinate. You know, you want to push people out of their comfort zone a little bit or they're not going to make any progress. And we want to get pushed out of our comfort zone, otherwise we won't make any progress. At the same time, we don't want to push somebody into panic, and we don't want to have somebody else push us into panic where we're going to break. I was dealing a while ago with a situation where a disciple was asking their guru whether or not they could do a particular thing that was very clear to everyone involved, including the disciple who was asking, not the best or ideal thing for them to do. I mean, it was like, Gurudev, can I have your permission to do this thing that I know isn't a very good thing to do, but that I desire very strongly, and I'm not sure that I can not do it. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so the person's spiritual master spoke to me at one point and said, you know, this disciple is saying to me, Gurudev, if you order me not to do this thing, I won't do it. So I'm willing to follow your order. And the spiritual master was talking to me and some other devotees about the situation and saying, I'm concerned that if I say to this disciple, I absolutely order you not to do this thing, that the person will break. That their capacity to function as a person, as a devotee, as a disciple will be severely damaged. They won't be able to function. And so the guru said to the disciple, I'm not going to order you. I'm not going to order you. I would prefer that you not do this, but if you do it, I'll still be there for you. And, we can still have a relationship, but it would be better if you did. This is not something you do. So this, dealing with people so we don't break them it's hard. It's hard. And if, despite everything, Krishna pushes us way out of our comfort zone through whatever jiva he uses, whether it's your husband or, a person at a shop, then it's best to take it that Krishna does feel I'm ready for that. If I've tried to slow things down to a level that I feel I can handle, and Krishna starts taking that car down the highway a lot faster than I think I'm comfortable with. And again, it's not ultimately another jiva who's doing that. It's not ultimately the temple president or my husband or the government official, or it ultimately is Krishna. And then we can look and say, well, maybe Krishna has more faith in me than I have in myself. Maybe he does think I'm ready for a deeper level of surrender and getting rid of false ego. Another thing that you may find helpful, and I'll end with this, is to keep in mind that our bodies and minds are wired very kindly by the Lord for our self-preservation. So Krishna has, or Lord Brahma probably, but ultimately Krishna has built into our bodies a protective response. So in other words, if, an angry barking dog or a tiger or a snake or, is in front of us, we go instantly into a protective response without thought, because you don't have time to think. If you've got 5 barking dogs at you, snarling barking dogs, you don't really have time to go, well, are these really dangerous dogs? Are they not dangerous dogs? What should I do? If someone's coming at you with a weapon, you don't really have the time to process. The brain and body have to make an instantaneous decision. Is this definitely a threat or maybe a threat? It doesn't even have an option of, no, this is not a threat. And in an instant, the body gets flooded, the kind of basic parts of the brain flood the body with chemicals to enable us to either run away very fast or to fight with the threat or to freeze and go into a camouflage place. And in the process of our body being flooded with these chemicals, the body turns off digestion because we don't need to digest if there's a tiger in front of us. It turns off healing, any healing that's going on, our immune response. It also takes blood away from our higher order thinking skills because we don't need to work out calculus problems if someone's in front of us with a weapon. It's an instant thing. It happens in a fraction of a second. And we identify the feelings that happened in our body at that time as the names we put on that are things like anger and fear. That's what we call that feeling. When we were a child, whenever we felt like that, our parents might say, oh, you're feeling angry, or don't be angry. Or, oh, I see you're being scared. And we learn to put a name on it as an emotion, and to start to, as we grew up, we started to think, well, I am angry. And then the rational mind tries to come up with reasons why we're feeling that way. So somehow we think there's a threat that on a very biological level, the body says there's a threat. Go into the threat system. Then we identify that as a particular emotion, and then we come up with reasons why we should or should not feel that emotion. So if we think of reasons why we shouldn't feel the emotion, we would try to repress it. If we come up with reasons why we should feel the emotion, well, my husband's just picky. He's just picky. He's just unreasonable. If he was reasonable like those ladies at the ashram, I wouldn't be upset. That's a rationalization by the mind as to what's happening in the body.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really happening is we're feeling that there's some sort of a threat. Now the physiological reaction to a social threat is exactly the same in the chemicals of the body and the responses of the brain to a physiological threat. So if we have a barking dog, or we have somebody telling us to do something that we would rather not do, or if we have somebody telling us that we're not as good of a person as we'd like to think we are, we experience that on a biological level as a threat. And the reason is very, very simple. We're social beings. We're like herd animals, like deer or cows, and we're dependent on, or elephants, and we're dependent on the goodwill of our herd for our survival. We have a hard time surviving alone. And if my herd doesn't like me, then, or if my herd is upset with me, it codes in the body and the brain just like a physiological threat. And that's especially true when it comes to my spouse or my parents, somebody in my intimate tribe, my intimate part of the herd, who I really depends on for living. They're the ones providing my home, my food, And if I feel that they're not happy with me for some reason, it feels like it's a physiological threat. And so it comes up with this thing where I want to run away, or I want to fight and defend myself. So if we recognize this system, again, it's in place out of love by Krishna to protect us very quickly in a situation of danger. And the Bhagavatam says that anger feels like it falls out of the sky. So one thing that we can see from today's verse, akartuhu, we are a passive observer. So we can step back and say, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. This is a natural physiological response to perceived threat. It's not me. I can breathe. I can control my physiological response to some extent, to take some deep breaths. Even things like widening your eyes, looking up. There's things we can do that break the physiological response and say, am I really being threatened here? Is that what's really going on? Stop the physiological response, access the intelligence. Am I really being threatened here? Is that what's going on? Do I need to respond as if there's a threat? Or can I get a little space between me, the soul, and the actions of my mind and body? Can I go instead to thinking about Krishna? Can I go instead to remembering a verse from the Bhagavad Gita? Can I remember one of the pastimes of the Lord? Can I remember what I've come to Krishna consciousness for? And can I act in that way? So that's another tool. All right, I think we should end here.
Thank you.
It's so interesting. I'm in a part of the world where now it's becoming summer, and I'm looking at all of you where it's becoming winter. And but I do miss all of you there in Auckland, and
I miss you too.
I wish I could be with you, not just over Zoom. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Bye.